Today we're talking about lesson planning, and we're looking at it from higher education. We have three more FQAS Foundation sessions, and lesson planning is this one. The next one I believe is course design, quality course design.
Yeah.
And the goal here is to develop this FQAS competency under teaching methods is developing a plan for learning. And so when we were going through our formal education for being K-12 teachers, a lot of that education was revolving around lesson planning and how to prepare to teach your classes. And the same kind of theories can be utilized at the college level. So what we're going to do is since we're all kind of seasoned lesson planners, we're going to kind of break it down deeply of like all the different things that we've learned over the years that we're looking at when we're making a lesson plan. Our lesson plan, it probably looks pretty. Let's look at the objectives and we'll get there. Oh, look at that guy. He looks like he's looking at some lesson plans. So our objectives here are to design an aligned college level lesson plan with objectives, activities, and assessments. Evaluate lesson plans for alignment, cohesion, and instructional effectiveness, and revise an existing lesson to improve engagement and clarity. Coherence. My gosh, my vocabulary is all. Wow, we use a lot of caps here because we want to yell at people. We're going to break this down with something proper. This is how the candle was set up. Was
all about the caps.
That was my one.
all
caps.
Why?
I
That's
angry.
I am very angry about lesson planning. No,
Nick is going to shout this entire slide.
Howdy, capital.
So,
bold letter.
veteran teachers make lesson planning look simple. They make going through a lesson look really well done. And today we're going to dive into the details of that and get into the background of that. For me, when I look at a lot of classes, it's really easy to lecture. There's not a lot of different things, like activities you're planning. You just go in there and talk about your expertise. And it's very passive learning for the students. And so good lesson planning takes time, focus, and detail. And as you grow as an educator and have more classes and you go through the experiences, and we're going to dig really in deeply to this today, it's going to become easier and more natural to take the science of teaching and building lesson plans and make it part of your daily classroom.
All right, so we're going to start by always thinking with the end in mind, right? Even at a lesson plan level. So you want to think to yourself, what do I hope and aspire that students will be able to do at the end of this lesson, know at the end of this lesson, understand at the end of this lesson? Ideally, we're still looking at Bloom's taxonomy when it comes to even a single lesson plan, right? What measurable verbs do we have when we're coming up with those goals of the learning objectives? You want to limit it though. In fact, I almost think 4 learning objectives for a lesson is quite a bit much to tackle, unless it's like a comprehensive review, maybe perhaps, right? Right before a big summative assessment. But we want to align it. We want to connect it. That's definitely, I mean, we all have as teachers and instructors, activities that we think are fun or engaging, or because we're so passionate about our topic, we think, oh, this is going to be great for them to learn about. But when you look at what's difficult about lesson planning is you're looking at a single day focus, but then you're also looking at a bigger picture focus, right? And are the activities that I'm doing today allowing students to formatively practice prior to summatively being assessed on these skills that I have? Okay. And did we cover at the end of the lesson the most essential information, right? Did what need to get covered get covered? Do I need to go back and reteach it? Do I have to extend this lesson into another day? Those are the questions I would always ask myself on, like, on an agenda. We would always have an agenda for me in my classroom, and there would be 5 to 6 items on that agenda. If I didn't finish it, is it something vital that I need to continue into the next day, or did we sufficiently meet those objectives?
Yeah, it's like having that laser-like focus on those objectives as you create your lecture, micro lectures, I'm gonna use that word instead, your activities, your assessments is very important. Now, as you look at like a seasoned instructor, a lot of times they'll find things that are the students enjoy or fun and they'll do them for many years, we gotta still, as a seasoned instructor, look at our lessons and say, is this really what's best for the students? Is this essential for moving them forward towards the competencies? And we gotta reevaluate things because they might just be filler. And a lot of the students now that if we look at Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like they want things that are meaningful and are applying to what they're going towards. There's a lot of why questions. So the next thing we're going to want to do is consider what the introduction is going to look like. For me, as I'm thinking about my lesson plan, I'm thinking like what's on the board or what's on the screen as the students enter. Maybe it's an inspirational quote, but probably somewhere you have to have those learning objectives or course competencies that you're aiming at. So they're walking in, it's already starting to enter their mind. We've talked in the new faculty experience, whether it's for adjuncts or it's for full-time, we talked about essential questions. Having an essential question on the board. It's not something that can easily be answered. There's no one-way direct answer. And it's something to get their brains activated as you're preparing and everyone's entering the room. They're seeing that essential question and start to think, oh, I should probably start to get myself prepared and start to generate what I think about this question. You know, some kind of opening with relevance would be important. Again, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, anyone now. Why does this topic, these learning objectives, why do they matter to their field of expertise that they're going into, their career, their program? I'm sure Tony probably started each day like talking about EPD. You're like, this is something that you're going to do in your job. Like, so we're going to go out there and we're going to do this. You need to know this. Mm-hmm. We want to activate prior knowledge. So one of the things I like to call entry tickets. Student comes in and maybe on the board they have a question. What are 3 things you learned last time? And they have a little few minutes to like consider those things. So we want them to activate the knowledge that they had from the last class and bring it forward. And so that would be like an entry ticket. It could be on just a piece of paper and then we discuss it quick. Are you going to do all of these things? No, but you can kind of mix these in. That's like a quick question and a past class review together. Maybe there's a scenario. You just went over some topic in the past few classes and now you put together a scenario and what would they do in this scenario? And then you have a discussion. That case study can go with that also. Another thing you're going to want to consider is give them a roadmap of what the day is going to look like. Whether it's time, like I always have time on my lessons. Sometimes I have time on my slides so they know how long we're going to spend on it. But you know, having an idea of what the path's going to look like, they can kind of feel their way through the day or the lesson. And some of your classes are 45 minutes, some of them are 3+ hours. So it looks different for each of you in your program. Some of yours are all day. Thank you, Tony. I'd look at you and say, oh my God, they are out there all day, no matter if it's hot or cold. Make expectations clear. When I think about this, I think about the culture that I want to create in my classroom. And that's something that's just not daily. It's not a daily thing like I started up every day. Like I'm starting that from the beginning. Hey, there are pre-work that needs to be done. If you're not ready, we're going to be checking that before we get started. And then there's conversations happening if that stuff's not getting done because it's part of the class to be prepared every day. You have to have the pre-work done. Maybe you're talking about participation that's necessary for the different parts of the day. But keep it tight. I'd say 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, things are going to run over. One of the things I threw on here in the bottom, because I thought this was great at the beginning, was current events. Like I was teaching financial literacy, so there was always current events. But there's current events in your programs. There's changes in safety regulations. There's all kinds of things. But another thing you want to consider, and I have it on the bottom here, is relationship building check-ins. As they're doing a case study, they're doing a scenario, they're filling out those different things that they learned the last class. You could walk around and say, oh, hey, what's going on? Hey, I see you wrote this down. How does this apply to what we're going to be talking about today? So having conversations, that's a good time to be working that in.
Yeah.
Please jump in there, Amber.
Thank you. Nick called them entry tickets, but I would always call it a warm-up activity. And to me, it was, I loved warm-up activities. It could be a pre-assessment of what they knew before I introduced a topic. It could be a quick review from yesterday's lesson. It could be a turn and talk to a partner and speaking conversationally in Spanish. Like when you're in 6th grade Spanish, it's just, hola, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? Hi, good morning, how are you? And back and forth. Like it could take 1 minute or it could take 5 minutes, right? Based on what it was. So I had a different warm-up activity for every day in class, and it was digitized. And it became a culture where my students would come in, they would connect to the presentation on the board immediately. The agenda would be there and they'd be working on their warm-up activity. And it gave me time to, and again, I know I was in person and I had that luxury, but it gave me time to focus my thoughts, to get ready and prepared, to walk around and circulate and check in on people and see how they were doing. And it connected the learning from one day to the next, but automatically got them in that frame of mind for your class. So I don't know, I'm a huge advocate for warm-up activities.
And if I have a Maya Choice classroom, one of the things I'm doing is I'm having, like, if there's a journal to walk into, I'm going to have something there that they're going to fill out online as they're going through the recorded lecture.
But honestly, yeah, if it's a recorded lecture and I have a warm-up activity displayed within my recorded lecture, I think that's benefiting a student regardless of modality as well. I really do. You're connecting the learning, you're bringing it back, you're interleaving, you're providing a flow and a structure of what they can expect during that course, you know, for the day, things like that.
So there's some vocabulary that we're talking about too. I use the word entry ticket, you use the word warm up, and there's also bell ringer. And the bell ringer could be at the beginning of class or at the end of class. So there's lots of different ways in lingo that we use as we go through this.
I was gonna say, do you ever feel bad, like when you're walking around doing check-ins and you don't get to every student?
I mean, I think about when I'm walking through, and I might even have like the seating chart there, and I might check off one day, and then I'll go a different way.
I
can't
didn't
get them all every day.
intentionally, like, yeah, throughout a week.
Make sure you
Then,
touch or contact everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, connect with everyone.
Yes,
Trying to say.
a
Okay.
sprinkling each day, but then making sure you're, getting everybody throughout the week. Okay, so considering the bigger picture, again, when we're lesson planning, it's tricky because I would ask myself, all right, here is where we are. And for our faculty, it's where are we at in the semester? How close are we to spring break? What do I want to get accomplished within this class before spring break, right? Do we have the time feasibly to get this done? Where is this lesson within this unit and this course and the progression and the time I have remaining? So you're really having to go back and forth, toggling back and forth to day, bigger picture, day, bigger picture. And I would say to myself, oh gosh, we don't have enough time to do all this before spring break. I got to cut it down. I got to trim it. What's the bare minimum of what I need to accomplish in these 2 weeks before we hit spring break? Because Lord knows when they come back from spring break, you're not going to be able to continue that momentum. You have to start with a new unit. You have to start from scratch, right? So also at this point, it's tough because a lot of your students are at varying levels, right? Some are further ahead, some are a little bit behind, and some are right on track. And you need to realize that, right? We all assume that everyone is in the same place at the same time, but they're definitely not. Okay, if you were to assess them on that given day without giving them the chance to review, or you would see very varying results. So think of that and always make sure you're realizing that, I'm assuming they all understand this because I covered it and I did it, but that might not be the case, right? How do lecturing activities prepare for, Nick might need to speak a little bit more to that one.
I mean, I'm going to look at the lecture content. I'm going to say micro lecture. I'm going to look at the activities and I'm going to consider, are they preparing them for what's out there in the work world? How is that? And how am I going to transition to those activities that we're going to do? How is it going to apply if we have a lab setting within our clinic? We're trying to prepare them for those moments that they're going to have. So I'm considering that as I'm putting things together, and maybe as I'm doing the activity, it's something that's going to be the building block to go out there and do.
I think the last two really tie in with one another because the more you teach the topic, the more often you come across what students think, their misconceptions, their previous assumptions that are incorrect. You can tackle that, right? But they will still come up here and there. And then you'll also know where students struggle the most. And you'll build tactics and strategies into your lesson plans to combat those, right? Like a very simple example for me is that everyone always thought Cinco de Mayo was Mexico's Independence Day. And I was like, guess what? It's not. And they'd be like, oh, we thought it was. I get why. Let's talk about why. Right? And let's tackle that misconception because I know a lot of people do. But really, this is also key in your lesson planning. Are you building a progression of complexity as well? So what I would like to do is very much instructor-driven guidance to individualized leading through the content, right? So like you start very hands-on with a controlled, structured environment and helping guide them through their learning, but eventually it becomes very independent and hands-off, and they're the ones doing it because it should build in progression and complexity. That's how I always looked at it.
Yeah. Like one last question, that where do I believe students will struggle the most? I think that's really important because then I can really lay down that foundation. Goes back to the second question a lot more. And it might be, I got to make sure that their knowledge of the terminology is really strong before they can really dive into something. So I got to consider their skills and what they're going to struggle at, and then, build up, like you were talking about the scaffolding there.
Mhm.
All right, then you're going to start planning those specific learning activities. All right, and you got to balance that input and output. So again, we'll go into classes and it's a lot of passive learning. So teaching, we need to teach faculty, more faculty, to understand that there's only so much passive learning that a student can take in and really keep it.
That window of
Long-term.
attention is getting smaller and
Yeah,
smaller.
and that window, like really, it's probably 7 to 15 minutes, but it might be getting shrinking down because they're like 3-minute videos now.
TikTok,
Right.
videos.
So we want to kind of balance out that, and I'm going to show a lesson, or one of us are going to show a lesson plan a little later here, where it's kind of built in 15-minute blocks, but you could go 15 minutes of micro lecture and then a 45-minute activity. And if the activity, we'll look to this down here, I believe, but if the activity isn't fully completed and you have, like your time says you need to move on to something else, finish the activity, because you got to make sure that anchor of that foundation of knowledge is there to move on to other things. Matching activities directly to learning objectives we already talked about. In each class, at least one moment where students produce something. Okay, that goes back.
Whether it be verbal or written, it doesn't
Yep.
have to be written. Are they producing something where they're actually contributing to the class?
And that could include reflection, like reflecting on your micro lecture. Hey, I just listened to you for 15 minutes. Okay, it's great. I've already forgot it if I'm a student. All right, but they're going to know that there's going to be some kind of reflection piece where they have to put it in a journal so I can see what they thought about the learn. I really want, we need to really consider that reflection piece as we're going through, or hands-on activities. We can see that they can apply what you just talked about from a demo. Think through all the logistics. That's a huge thing, thinking through all the logistics. What kind of materials do you need? This takes time.
How many
What-
printed items do you need?
You know,
I would give my students choice. Do they want it digitally or printed? And I would have it written down for every class of my day, how many students wanted things printed so that I could prepare it ahead of time.
I mean, I could randomly create groups, or maybe I need leads in my groups who are more of an expert, and they're going to be kind of the tutors of the group. Like however you're going to set things up, I may have to set them up by myself, or I might use a random group generator.
I make them draw cards.
You use cards?
I make them draw cards for groups.
We use tongue depressors.
Nice.
What if all 4 of the students that struggle the most end up in that group together?
Struggle together.
They struggle together, and actually it works so better because I don't have to walk quite so much. I can stay with that group.
Yeah. So I would
Just
try
saying.
to, I would try to balance those out personally with my classes. But we're talking, there's 30 students in a class when we're in that situation. So it was a little different situation. You have 20, and yeah, you might want them to struggle through some things.
Well, and what we do sometimes making mistakes is the best way to learn.
Yep.
I can tell them all day long of how to do something. Do they really comprehend it? No, I just told them what to do. When they mess up and they figure out why, I feel they learn a lot better.
True story. And we're all gonna find our way and how we want to do that best. The other thing I have on there is plan transitions between activities, and those transitions could be those reflections, it could be some different kinds of brain breaks, but just thinking about how you're gonna go from and segue from one thing to the next.
Maybe it sounds silly, but actually physically getting up and moving too is a really good transition to clear a mind, regardless of age. It works really well.
Ask yourself, who is doing the cognitive work, you or them? We want to really push that brain work onto the students. We want them to do the thinking. We want them to really be activating and being engaged in the learning. And that's where we want to aim at. So think about that as maybe you're lecturing for 45 minutes. Who is doing the cognitive work?
Okay.
Our assessment person. There you are.
Checks for understanding in the midst of a lesson, right? And these can be quick and interactive. They can be verbal, they can be written, right? Various different forms. You can grade them, you can not grade them, tons of different ways which we can be doing it. Even in the midst of a lecture, what I would like to do is transition slides, right? Every 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there. And on that transition side, it would be a question or a poll or, like a quick turn and talk, like I said before too. Something really low stakes, just simple and easy to, okay, we needed to process what we just talked about. We need to apply it in a very little way quickly here. And I'm walking around rotating and trying to hear, again, like, do we have any non-understanding? What are the topics that I'm hearing that we are understanding, and what am I hearing that we're not understanding? Build in reflection time, especially towards the end of a lesson for students, right? A journal, a discussion.
Elbow partners.
The in-person discussion is very powerful. Yes, for sure. And then plan when you're going to pause to gauge learning. That's what this really is. Okay. You're pausing, you're gauging the learning that has happened, and you're allowing them to immediately apply it.
This is when I observe new faculty, this is the hardest thing for them. They're in the middle of teaching. They're really want to ask the question, they ask it, but then they don't give the students time to reflect and think.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, you got to make it uncomfortable amount of time. Like I'm willing to sit there and wait them out. They need time to reflect, and then they got to take time maybe to say to themselves, oh, I can try this one. But hopefully you create a welcoming environment that they're going to feel comfortable, even if they're not perfect on their answer. But if you think it's long enough, it's probably not long enough.
And again, we were lucky in that we had fully in-person modality, but like, especially nonverbal cues, I would be speaking 100% in Spanish by the time my students were juniors and seniors. And I would really look at those facial expressions. And the second I saw this, I went, stop, pause, write something on the board, help them out. And then I'd see a nod. I mean, like, you really rely on those nonverbal cues for students as well.
And so if you watch us teach, a lot of times if I'm teaching, I'm looking around at people's eyes the whole time.
Yeah.
If I see people are having like nonverbals that are like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or they don't look like they're paying attention. I've seen a lot of people just stand right behind their computer and just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta feel the room, and you gotta move around the room. You gotta use proximity, right? So if Amber's kind of spacing out, if I just walk within 3 feet of her, that's going to change. Right. And then I just walk away kind of thing. But like that proximity control is a nonverbal that you can use to re-engage. But I also walk around rows. I want to make sure that they are on target for what we're supposed to be doing. So,
and I think it's hard for us because we have so much content to get through. That's what we always think of. I have the curriculum, I have the content, I have to get through it within this timeline. But we ourselves need to stop and say, are they understanding it? Not, did I finish my lecture today? Did I finish the presentation? And if I'm hearing that they're not getting something, what am I going to do differently tomorrow to address that and to reinforce it? How are my lesson plans going to change tomorrow based on what happened today?
I just reflected and found out I spelled reflection wrong up there.
And separate.
And so, thank
All the
you.
capital letters.
It's all the darn capital letters.
The capital.
All right, well, I am a man that's going to improve.
Reflection.
As I look at that reflection thing up there, don't look at it too long, we'll move forward. Is one of the things that I would consider is even, I would have students reflect and send me an email. And when I had them send that email to me, then they gave me a moment where I could actually send them a direct email back with some of the thing, like responding to what they were saying, and really addressing what they were thinking about. So that's another way you could do something if you don't want it graded, but you just want to check in on their learning, or how they're feeling about the pulse of the class. You gotta develop a realistic timeline as you think about your lesson. And on the right here is what I was talking about earlier. It's kind of a form that we use in the new faculty experience. And I like to think those blocks as 15 minutes, but when I think of the blocks as 15 minutes, I'm thinking more as the micro lecture, and then those activities could stretch out more. But I would like to consider my lesson in blocks. Also consider you're going to need some time built in between those, because things sometimes are shorter, but lots of times they're longer. If I'm getting in a really good discussion with students and they're engaged, I may need to keep that going for 10 minutes longer. All right, then I may have to reduce somewhere else, or I'm going to have to change what the next class looks like, so I make sure I cover things. So consider that. And I said this earlier, activities may need longer. Like if there's an activity that's important and they need to do a specific thing, you want to make sure it's achieved before you move on to something else. You just don't cut that short, because there's probably some really good learning going on, even if it goes beyond, because maybe it's taking a little longer to understand it. Identify those must do versus those nice to do content. Yeah. And when I have those must do's, I know what those are, and I go over on other things, I'll remove some of those nice to do kind of things out of there, and just stick to that activity a little longer. Say, yeah, I'll push this, or I won't do that this semester, kind of thing, if it's not necessary to be in there. Leave 3 to 5 minutes at the end, your closing statements. Hey, this is what we learned today. Are there questions about that? Were there some muddy points that we need to recover before you leave? Could I make a video to cover that while you're gone, or a podcast? Some reminders of things that they need to get done before they return next time. And then that reflection exit ticket again there. So yeah, so this, if you want this form, you can email CETO support. I'm actually going to put it,
There's so many.
This is just our form that we kind of showcase a new faculty experience.
AI
I will put it within the faculty resources within this document.
Because you have it in faculty resources.
I will put it there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
not
you. Thank you,
there yet.
Amber. Thank you, Amber.
But again, did it align? Did it connect? Did it all come full circle and full picture for the students? So did our activities support those learning objectives? Did our assessments measure what the students practiced? Was there a flow from the intro to activity to checking for understanding to closure, right? Did it all come full circle? Did you intentionally connect to previous, and then also give a little bit of foreshadowing to last lessons, right? So in the last couple minutes, sometimes it's verbally closing that circle for the students. Okay, here's what we did today. Here's the activities that we've completed. Tomorrow, this is what I expect of you. This is how we're going to be starting. We're going to bring this back. We're going to, continue with this because I saw us struggling, and I'll be sure to start with an opening activity that will address that. Could they identify the objective being practiced? If one member of CETL came in, right, and we were looking at your course competencies, I think that's what Nick is getting at here, right? If I was in WIDS, which we don't want to be in WIDS, but if I were in WIDS and I looked at your course competencies and I saw your classroom in action, would I know which course competency that lesson was addressing? That's a good question. I like it. And then after teaching, a good instructor will reflect numerous times, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we have to do it in some busy paperwork, document style type stuff. But like a good instructor always says, how did that lesson go? What could have been better? What went well? What worked? What didn't work? What can I change for next time? Should I make a note of that? I got to the point because I am that person
Yes.
where I digitized my entire yearly lesson plan for every single class.
And I'm that
And
person
I
also
make-
because I had a Google
And I make
slideshow
notes.
for each day. So,
My warm-up activities were a slide for every single class, for every single day of the entire school year. Yes.
yeah, and so I would have
I had
80
one ready to
80
go.
right in a row, day 1, day 2, day 3, and then I would just adjust them every semester to make them better. Now, if I had a Blackboard course, which I did we had Schoology where we were in Milton, in those modules, what I would have done is had a document that was hidden from students with reminders to myself of the things that went well and the things that need to be updated.
Yep.
That's a good place, because then you're gonna move that forward anyways. It'll be naturally there. You can just check that over
Well,
and make the changes you need.
What Nick and I talked about is that while we spent a huge amount of time lesson planning early on, later on it became what minor tweaks, improvements, the onus of my time and work got spent elsewhere, right? Because lesson planning became natural and it was a flow and it was just tweaks and improvements here and there, right? After so many years having digitized it.
If there's a struggle point in a test, if there was a struggle point in an activity that was a summative, I would also go back to those notes I had in Blackboard and say, hey, I got to spend more time on this. Everyone struggled on these 3 questions, or they struggled on this skill. And then I'd have to remember, I'd go back through those notes and really focus more on that. Well, not forgetting the other details, but if I know those things are going to be struggles in the past class, I should fix those for the future. Tim, you didn't have your presentations numbered day 1, day 2?
No, I taught out of my Schoology course shell, and I had everything laid out there because you were talking about entry and exit tickets. And one of the things I like to do is pull examples of work, because I did digital media and video production.
Yeah.
Pull examples of work from previous days, previous projects, past years, and bring them forward to show as what to do, what not to do, examples like that. And that was where I would connect previous days learning with that day's learning and kind of move it along. Bless you.
Thank you.
So yeah, a single slideshow didn't work for me in my content area, but having those moments where I could use examples from previous work, it did a lot to communicate to students. The other thing that I was going to say too is we all have groups of students that are stronger or weaker in different areas academically, or as we started to realize in the K-12 world with like soft skills. And you're developing professionals that are going to go out into the workforce. So if you're seeing deficits along the way, aside from your content, that's a good time with all of these activities and these interactions to kind of address some of those things or force issues of people having to be professional and having to use communication and different things like that are going to tie in. And those are probably related to your program outcomes as well. So it all ties together.
All right, we will thank you for being here. Next Friday, assessment day part 4.